The bar was packed that night, country music humming through old speakers, glasses clinking, regulars arguing over nothing important. Olivia moved quietly between tables in her light blue waitress uniform, refilling drinks no one noticed running empty. One man laughed as she walked past. "Relax, sweetheart. You're just a waitress." A few people chuckled. She didn't respond, just set another glass down perfectly straight. Then the front door slammed open. 3 masked men walked in. Shotgun, pistols, silence. "Everybody on the floor, now." Chairs crashed, people screamed, and while the entire bar panicked, the rookie waitress slowly turned toward the exits, already counting something no one else could see. If you believe real strength often hides behind ordinary faces, comment where you're watching from and subscribe, because tonight's story is about the moment an entire bar realized they had completely misjudged the quietest person in the room. The rusty anchor sat just off the highway where long-haul truckers, off-duty workers, and locals gathered to forget the week. Neon lights buzzed softly against wood-paneled walls, and country music played low enough that conversations layered over it like background noise. Olivia moved between tables in a light blue waitress uniform that still looked too new compared to the worn floors beneath her feet. She carried drinks steadily, never rushing, never fumbling, even when orders stacked up faster than she could clear them. Most people barely noticed her except when their glasses ran empty. To them, she was just the rookie waitress, quiet, polite, forgettable. But anyone watching closely might have noticed how she paused briefly near the entrance every few minutes, or how she chose paths between tables that always left a clear view of the exits. At the corner booth, a group of regulars laughed louder than necessary. One of them, a heavy-set man named Carl, who had been drinking since late afternoon, snapped his fingers as Olivia passed. "Hey, rookie," he called, grinning at his friends. "You move this slow everywhere or just here?" A few chuckles followed. Olivia stopped beside the table and placed a fresh beer down without reacting. "Anything else, sir?" she asked calmly. Carl leaned back, amused by her lack of response. "Yeah," he said. "Smile a little. Customers tip better when the help looks happy." The men laughed again. Olivia gave a small, polite nod and turned away. She didn't argue, didn't roll her eyes. She simply continued working, her expression unchanged. Across the bar, an older man nursing a single whiskey watched the exchange quietly, his gaze lingering longer than the others before returning to his drink. The night grew louder as more customers filled the space. Pool balls cracked in the back room. Glasses clinked. Someone argued about a football game playing silently on the television above the bar. Olivia navigated through it all with measured precision, balancing trays effortlessly, even when someone bumped her shoulder. When a chair sat slightly angled into a walkway, she adjusted it absent-mindedly, creating a clear path without breaking stride. When a family near the wall looked uncomfortable under a flickering light, she switched the overhead lamp before they asked. Small things. Invisible things. The kind of awareness people assume comes from experience serving tables, not from years spent learning how to read environments under pressure. Carl wasn't finished entertaining his friends. When Olivia returned with another round, he leaned forward again. "You ever worked somewhere busy before?" he asked loudly. "Because this place gets real stressful." The sarcasm drew another wave of laughter. She set the drinks down carefully. "I'll manage," she replied softly. One of the men added, "Bet she'd panic if anything serious happened." Carl grinned wider. "Yeah, she looks like the type that freezes." Olivia met his eyes briefly, not offended, just steady. "Everyone reacts differently," she said. Then she moved on before the conversation could continue. Behind her, the laughter resumed, but the older man at the bar lifted his head slightly, as if something in her tone didn't match the image they were mocking. Outside, headlights swept briefly across the windows as vehicles passed along the highway. Olivia noticed each reflection automatically, her gaze flicking toward the glass without turning her head. A dark SUV slowed near the parking lot entrance before continuing down the road. Nothing unusual. Still, she registered it the same way she registered everything else, quietly, without alarm. She refilled salt shakers, wiped a spill near the counter, and checked the back hallway door to ensure it latched properly. The bartender, Mike, chuckled as she tested it. "You check that thing more than I do," he said. She offered a faint smile. "Habit," she replied. He shrugged, unaware of how literal that answer was. The bar settled into its usual rhythm as the clock pushed toward late evening. Conversations blurred into background noise, and the tension of the workday melted into relaxed familiarity. Olivia carried another tray toward Carl's table when someone accidentally knocked a glass from a nearby counter. It shattered loudly on the floor, drawing startled reactions from several patrons. Before anyone else moved, Olivia stepped forward, guiding people back with a calm gesture. "Give me a second," she said gently, already sweeping shards away from foot traffic. Her movements were efficient, controlled, almost rehearsed. Carl watched her work and shook his head. "See?" he joked to his friends. "Crisis management right there." More laughter followed, softer now. She didn't respond. She finished cleaning the glass, checked that no one was hurt, and resumed serving as if nothing had happened. At the bar, the older man finally spoke to Mike. "New girl?" he asked quietly. Mike nodded. "Started last week. Keeps to herself." The man watched Olivia cross the room again, noticing how she instinctively positioned herself where she could see both entrances at once. "She's observant," he murmured. Mike shrugged. "Probably just nervous." The older man didn't answer. Something about her calm didn't look like nerves to him. It looked practiced. Outside, faint engine noise rolled through the parking lot again, lingering this time instead of passing by. Olivia's head tilted almost imperceptibly, her attention drawn toward the front windows, as if she'd heard something beneath the music no one else noticed. Carl raised his voice again as she approached with another refill. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, lifting his empty glass. "Try not to disappear on us. You're finally getting the hang of things." She placed the drink down neatly, aligning it with the edge of the table. "Anything else?" she asked. "Yeah," he said with a grin. "Relax. You're just a waitress." The words hung in the air for a moment longer than expected. Olivia nodded once and turned away. As she walked toward the counter, the music skipped slightly before continuing, and the front door's shadow darkened the floor near the entrance. The door slammed open hard enough to rattle the glass panels. 3 masked men stepped inside. One carried a shotgun. The others held pistols. "Everybody on the ground!" one of them shouted. Chairs scraped violently, glass shattered. Someone screamed, and while panic exploded through the bar, the rookie waitress didn't freeze. She turned slowly toward the exits, her eyes already counting distances, angles, and people. Because in that instant, Olivia stopped looking like a waitress and started looking like someone who had been here before. The music died mid-note as panic swallowed the room. Chairs overturned, drinks spilled, and people dropped instinctively to the floor as the shotgun lifted toward the ceiling. A deafening blast followed, not aimed at anyone, just loud enough to erase hesitation. Dust drifted down from the rafters while screams echoed against the walls. One of the masked men kicked the door shut behind him and shouted again, louder this time. "Phones down! Hands where I can see them!" Fear spread unevenly, some patrons freezing while others scrambled too quickly, bumping into tables and each other. In the middle of it all, Olivia lowered herself calmly behind the nearest table, moving at the same pace she had used all night carrying drinks. No sudden motion, no panic, just controlled breathing as her eyes mapped the room in seconds. Carl lay flat beside his booth, hands shaking so badly he knocked over a chair trying to comply. Okay, he muttered, voice cracking. The confidence from earlier had vanished completely. Nearby, a woman sobbed uncontrollably while clutching her husband's arm. One of the gunmen paced aggressively between tables, shouting conflicting orders that only made people more confused. Olivia noticed it immediately. Poor coordination, overlapping commands, nervous energy. Not professionals. Dangerous, but uncertain. She shifted slightly, positioning herself so the overturned table shielded the elderly couple closest to her from direct sight lines. "Stay low," she whispered gently without looking at them. Slow breaths. The man nodded instinctively, matching her calm tone without understanding why it steadied him. The leader moved toward the bar, pistol sweeping across the room. "Register, now!" he barked at Mike, who struggled to open the drawer with trembling hands. Bottles rattled as another gunman shoved stools aside, searching for witnesses who might resist. Olivia's gaze flicked toward the side exit near the hallway, too far for anyone panicking to reach safely, but close enough if movement stayed unnoticed. She waited, watching patterns instead of weapons, where their attention drifted, how long they focused on one area before turning away. When a burst of shouting near the front distracted them, she shifted backward one step, then another, as if simply seeking better cover. Her hand brushed the wall panel near the service station, fingers pressing a small switch beneath the counter. The side exit locked with a soft click no one heard over the chaos. A glass rolled across the floor nearby, spinning slowly until it stopped against her shoe. The sound drew the attention of the youngest gunman. He turned suddenly, pistol aimed downward. "You," he snapped, pointing toward her. "Don't move." Olivia froze instantly, hands visible, posture compliant. Her face showed fear now, not exaggerated, just believable enough to disappear into the crowd. The gunman watched her for a moment longer before turning away again, satisfied. But what he missed was how her eyes continued tracking reflections in the mirror behind the bar, monitoring positions without lifting her head. Across the room, the older man who had watched her earlier noticed something different. While everyone else stared at the guns, she watched people, counting, assessing, guiding quietly with subtle gestures no one consciously registered. Near the pool table, a teenager hyperventilated, breaths coming too fast. His mother tried to calm him, but only grew more frantic herself. Olivia leaned slightly toward them. "Look at me," she whispered, keeping her voice low enough to avoid attention. The boy's eyes locked onto hers instinctively. "In through your nose. Slow." She demonstrated once, steady and controlled. After a few seconds, his breathing began to match hers. The mother stared at Olivia with silent gratitude, confusion, mixing with relief. Olivia gave a small nod before lowering her gaze again. Around them, panic softened just enough to prevent someone from doing something reckless. Control returned in tiny increments, invisible but spreading. At the bar, Mike finally opened the register, hands still shaking. Bills spilled out as the leader stuffed them into a bag. "Nobody plays hero," he warned. "We leave, nobody gets hurt." Olivia's eyes flicked briefly toward the entrance. Outside headlights flashed faintly through the windows. Passing traffic or something else, impossible to tell yet. She calculated quietly. 3 gunmen, limited exits, frightened civilians clustered too tightly. Any sudden move would cause chaos. So she stayed still, choosing patience instead of action. Her calm began affecting others without them realizing it. Conversations stopped turning into screams. People followed instructions more carefully. Even Carl, still pale, glanced toward her once as if searching for reassurance. The youngest gunman circled back again, agitation growing. He noticed the locked side door and frowned. "Why's this shut?" he muttered, tugging it once. It didn't open. He glanced around suspiciously. Olivia lowered her eyes immediately, appearing small, harmless. The leader waved him off. "Forget it, we're almost done." But tension crept into their movements now. They wanted out quickly. Olivia knew that urgency was both danger and opportunity. She shifted slightly, guiding another couple lower behind a booth with a simple hand motion. The older observer at the bar watched her again, realization beginning to form. Not about who she was yet, but about what she was doing. She wasn't hiding. She was managing the room. Outside, faint blue lights flickered briefly across the window glass before disappearing again. Someone near the entrance noticed and gasped quietly. The leader spun toward the sound. "Who called?" he shouted, raising his pistol. Fear surged again, threatening to undo the fragile calm Olivia had built. She spoke softly without thinking, voice steady enough to anchor attention. "Nobody needs to move," she said, almost conversationally. Several people instinctively obeyed her instead of the gunmen, freezing exactly where they were. The leader's eyes snapped toward her now, truly noticing her composure for the first time. "You," he said slowly, pointing the gun directly at her. "Waitress, stand up." The room held its breath as Olivia rose carefully to her feet, hands visible, eyes calm. And for the first time since the robbery began, every person in the bar realized she didn't look scared at all. If you've ever judged someone too quickly based on what you thought you saw, comment "never judge" below, because what the gunman noticed next was about to change everything. The room felt smaller as Olivia stood. Every movement slowed, every breath louder than it should have been. The gunman's pistol remained fixed on her chest, while the other two paused their frantic collecting, watching now with growing suspicion. People on the floor avoided looking directly at her, afraid sudden attention might make things worse. Olivia raised her hands slowly, palms open, exactly as instructed. Her face showed calm compliance, but her eyes moved carefully, counting distances, measuring tension, reading posture the way she once read terrain. The leader tilted his head slightly. "You're awful calm," he said. His voice wasn't angry anymore. It was uncertain. That uncertainty was more dangerous than rage. "I'm doing what you asked," Olivia replied quietly. Her tone was neutral, respectful, steady enough to lower confrontation without sounding submissive. The youngest gunman shifted closer, studying her. "You military or something?" he asked suddenly. The question hung heavy in the air. Several people glanced up instinctively, confused by how quickly he had sensed something different. Olivia didn't answer. She simply held eye contact for a brief moment before lowering her gaze again. Silence stretched. Outside, faint movement flickered through the front windows, shapes shifting beyond the neon glow. The leader noticed her glance and turned sharply toward the door, tension rising again. "Nobody looks outside," he snapped. But the damage was done. He had started watching her instead of controlling the room. Near the pool table, a man groaned softly. A shard of broken glass had sliced into his forearm when the chaos began, blood soaking through his sleeve unnoticed until now. His wife whispered frantically for help, trying to press a napkin against the wound with shaking hands. The sight caught Olivia's attention immediately. Blood loss wasn't severe yet, but panic would make it worse. She spoke carefully, eyes still on the gunman. "He needs pressure on that," she said calmly. The leader frowned. "Not your problem." Olivia didn't argue. She waited 1 beat, 2, then said quietly, "If he passes out, you'll have more panic. That slows you down." The logic landed. The leader hesitated, weighing risk against control. Finally, he gestured sharply. "Quick, no tricks." Olivia moved slowly toward the injured man, kneeling beside him with deliberate care. Her hands changed the moment they touched the wound, confident, efficient, practiced. She folded a clean bar towel tightly, applied firm pressure, and adjusted his arm angle to slow bleeding. "Look at me," she told him gently. "Stay awake." Her voice shifted subtly, carrying authority without aggression. The man obeyed instinctively. Even the gunman watched in silence for a moment, unsettled by how natural her movements looked. She tied the towel securely, using a precise knot that held pressure without cutting circulation. The older observer near the bar inhaled sharply, recognition dawning not from words, but from muscle memory he'd seen before. The youngest gunman stepped closer again. "That ain't waitress training," he muttered. Olivia wiped her hands slowly on a cloth, careful not to make sudden movements. "I've seen accidents before," she said simply. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. The leader studied her harder now, trying to place what bothered him. Outside, faint red and blue reflections began flickering across parked cars, barely visible through the tinted glass. Sirens remained distant, controlled, cautious. Someone had called for help earlier than the robbers realized. Olivia noticed the reflections instantly, but didn't react. Instead, she shifted slightly so her body blocked the injured man from view, protecting him from becoming a liability in the gunman's eyes. One of the robbers moved toward the front window to peek outside. I think, he started, but the leader cut him off sharply. Nobody checks, we finish and go. His voice carried strain now. The plan was slipping from his control, and he knew it. Olivia watched the tension ripple through them. Nervous criminals made mistakes. Mistakes created danger. She spoke again, soft enough to sound helpful rather than challenging. If people stay calm, you leave faster, she said. The leader glanced at her, irritated, but listening despite himself. She continued, no one here wants trouble. Her tone lowered the emotional temperature just enough to keep panic from reigniting. Around the room, breathing slowed again. People followed her rhythm unconsciously. Outside, officers moved into position behind vehicles, watching through binoculars. One of them focused on the interior, eyes narrowing as he observed Olivia kneeling beside civilians, guiding movements with subtle gestures. Who's that? A younger officer asked quietly. The senior officer didn't answer immediately. He watched her posture, the way she positioned herself between threat and crowd, the calm cadence of her instructions. Something familiar stirred in his memory. Briefings, training footage, stories shared in quiet rooms. He leaned closer to the glass. Inside, Olivia rose slowly again as instructed, returning to the center of the room. The leader pointed toward her once more. You stay where I can see you, he ordered. She nodded slightly and complied. The room felt suspended between two outcomes now. Carl, still lying near his booth, stared at her with wide eyes, realization beginning to replace fear. This was not the same woman he had mocked an hour earlier. She wasn't frozen, she wasn't overwhelmed. She looked prepared. The older observer at the bar whispered under his breath, almost involuntarily, "That's training." Outside, the senior officer finally spoke into his radio, voice low with disbelief. "Command, be advised. We may have a trained operator inside." Inside the bar, the youngest gunman suddenly grabbed Olivia's arm, turning her slightly toward him. "Who are you?" he demanded. The room stiffened instantly. Olivia met his eyes calmly, breathing steady, giving nothing away. For a long second, nobody moved. Outside, the officer listening through a directional microphone caught her voice clearly as she answered. "My name's Olivia," she said quietly. The officer froze, because the cadence, the calm, measured delivery, matched a voice he hadn't heard since deployment briefings years ago. He lowered the radio slowly and whispered, almost to himself, "That's a SEAL." And inside the bar, the leader's expression changed the moment he realized the rookie waitress wasn't just another hostage. The realization didn't explode into chaos. It settled into the room slowly, like pressure building before a storm. The leader's grip on his pistol tightened as he studied Olivia differently now, not as staff, not as a victim, but as a variable he hadn't planned for. Outside, red and blue lights reflected faintly against the windows, still distant enough to avoid panic, but close enough to signal the end was approaching. Inside, nobody spoke. Even the frightened whispers had stopped. Olivia stood exactly where he told her, shoulders relaxed, breathing steady, eyes calm without challenging him. She didn't look heroic. She looked patient, and that patience unsettled him more than resistance ever could. "You military," the leader said again, quieter this time. It wasn't a question anymore. Olivia didn't confirm it. She didn't deny it either. "I'm doing what you asked," she replied gently. The neutrality in her voice removed confrontation from the moment, leaving him unsure how to escalate. Nervous criminals relied on fear to control situations. Calm removed that advantage. One of the other gunmen shifted anxiously. "Cops are out there," he muttered. The leader snapped back. "I know." But his eyes never left Olivia. He had begun measuring risk differently now, calculating whether she was a threat, whether she might act, whether panic would return if he pushed too far. The power dynamic had shifted without anyone raising a weapon. Outside, officers crouched behind patrol cars, watching through the glass. The senior officer who recognized her voice spoke quietly into his radio. "Hold positions. No breach. The younger officers looked confused. Sir? One asked. The senior officer kept his eyes on Olivia. Because whoever she is, he said carefully, she's already controlling the room. Inside, Olivia noticed subtle movement through reflections, but gave no indication she saw help arriving. Instead, she turned her attention back to the civilians, small gestures guiding people lower, slowing their breathing, preventing sudden movements that could trigger violence. The injured man she treated earlier remained conscious, stabilized enough to avoid drawing attention again. The leader exhaled sharply, nerves cracking through his confidence. "We're leaving," he announced suddenly. "Everybody stays down." He motioned toward the door, but when the youngest gunman tried the handle, it didn't open. He pulled harder, still locked. Confusion flashed across his masked face. "It's stuck," he said. The leader swore under his breath and stepped forward himself, yanking the handle with growing frustration. The realization hit slowly. They were trapped. Panic flickered between them now, replacing control. Olivia remained still, watching carefully. Panic in armed men was dangerous, but predictable. She spoke softly before fear could spike. "The police will want everyone safe," she said. "No one here wants anyone hurt." Her voice stayed calm enough that it didn't sound like negotiation, just observation. The leader turned toward her again, anger battling uncertainty. "You did this?" he demanded. Olivia shook her head slightly. "Doors lock automatically sometimes," she replied evenly. The ambiguity bought time without provoking him. Outside, officers moved closer, forming a perimeter. Through the windows, flashing lights became impossible to ignore. One of the gunmen cursed loudly, pacing in tight circles. "We're surrounded." The leader's breathing grew heavier, his plan collapsing faster than he could adapt. Olivia watched the moment carefully, the exact point where fear outweighed aggression. She stepped half a pace forward, slow enough not to alarm him. "Nobody here is fighting you," she said. "You can walk out safely." Her tone carried something different now. Not authority, but certainty. The leader hesitated. People on the floor watched silently, sensing the shift. Carl stared at her openly now, disbelief mixing with shame as he remembered every joke he'd made earlier. The older observer at the bar nodded faintly to himself, understanding fully at last. Outside, a negotiator's voice echoed faintly through a loudspeaker, instructing surrender. The gunmen exchanged glances. For the first time, they looked unsure of each other. Olivia didn't move closer. She simply held eye contact with the leader, calm, anchoring the chaos around him. Seconds stretched. Then slowly, the leader lowered his weapon. The sound of it touching the floor felt louder than the shotgun blast earlier. One by one, the others followed, uncertainty turning into surrender. Officers rushed in moments later, controlled and precise, securing weapons and guiding everyone to safety. Voices overlapped again. Relief, disbelief, quiet sobbing. Olivia stepped back immediately, allowing authorities to take over, blending once more into the crowd she had protected all along. No dramatic acknowledgement, no announcement, just another person being escorted outside. Cool night air hit the group as patrons gathered near patrol cars. Carl approached her hesitantly, hands still shaking. I'm sorry," he said awkwardly. "I didn't know." Olivia gave a small, tired smile. "You weren't supposed to," she replied. The simplicity of the answer left him speechless. Nearby, the senior officer walked toward her slowly, recognition clear in his expression. He stopped just short of a formal salute, choosing instead a quiet nod. "Ma'am," he said respectfully. She returned the nod just as subtly. No explanations followed. None were needed. Inside the bar, broken glass glittered under flashing lights as officers finished their work. Olivia slipped back through the doorway briefly, picking up a fallen tray and setting it upright on the counter. Habit more than necessity. Mike watched her in disbelief. You saved us," he said quietly. She shook her head. "Everyone stayed calm," she answered. He laughed softly, overwhelmed. "Because you told us how." She didn't respond. She simply wiped the counter clean, restoring normalcy piece by piece. As the night wound down, conversations returned slowly, filled now with gratitude instead of laughter. The same people who had overlooked her hours earlier now watched her with quiet respect. Yet Olivia avoided attention, helping stack chairs and gather scattered napkins like any other employee finishing a shift. When someone asked why she never told anyone about her past, she paused only briefly before answering. "Because most days," she said gently, "people just need someone to do their job well." She stepped outside again as dawn hinted at the horizon, patrol lights fading behind her. The rusty anchor looked ordinary once more, just another roadside bar preparing for tomorrow. Olivia walked toward the parking lot alone, shoulders relaxed, the tension finally leaving her posture. No applause followed her. No headlines waited. Just quiet peace after danger passed. And if stories like this remind you that real heroes rarely announce themselves, that courage often looks like calm in the middle of fear, then subscribe and stay with us, because some of the strongest protectors in the world are still walking among us, unnoticed, until the moment they're needed most.